The debate you're about to watch features me and post modern theology, aka Matt. Now, I was interested in having a good faith civil discussion, but evidently Matt is incapable of that. He agreed at the beginning that no ideas should be free from ridicule or questioning, but then at the end he rage quit because I said something that was off limits. I questioned Jesus' sexuality, and that made him so butthurt that he ran away from the debate. Matt requested to debate with me and insisted on hosting, which I said was fine. He spent the entire debate misrepresenting my position, straddling me with issues that are foundational to his moral system, and then at the end, he got triggered and rage quit.
Me talking over you is not wrong according to your worldview. I mean, I can do that. It's not objectively wrong.
Does this seem like someone who's actually interested in having civil discourse? I'll let you decide that. Now, after he kicked me off the live stream, he stayed on for a couple of minutes and gave some closing thoughts, which I'll leave in at the end of the video. I'm gonna include the entire debate in its entirety, uninterrupted, and then at the end, I'm gonna come back and give a little bit of feedback of my own. So feel free to use the timestamps on the video to skip around and find whatever it is that you want to watch. But you should watch the whole thing.
Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. What's your name?
Jed, J-E-D.
Jed, Matt. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
All right, am I coming through clearly for you?
Yeah, crystal clear. How's my audio?
Yeah, good. All right, guys, thank you for joining. Today we have Jed from Flying Spaghetti Auditor. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, and we're going to be having a debate or discussion about, I guess we could say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jed, maybe atheistic morality versus Christian morality or morality in general. Is that something that around the topic we'll be discussing today?
Yeah, that sounds great to me. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we're going to try and aim for about 60 minutes. Maybe we'll have some questions at the end as well. So, mate, just before we kick it off, I generally like to make sure every sort of discussion bears a little bit of fruit. I think it would be good for the audience as well just to hear about your channel. From what I gauge of it, it is geared towards religious content. So do you mind just telling us about your channel a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So my main purpose on Instagram and YouTube are my primary platforms is spreading skepticism and critical thinking towards religious claims. And I like to sprinkle in a little bit of humor and ridicule here and there because I always like to say, no ideas are so sacred that they're exempt from ridicule. So, any sort of claim about God, any religion, I mainly tackle Christian theology, but here and there I'll talk about Islam. And of course I want to get into more other religions as well, like Mormonism is on my list of to-do lists. So, yeah, just spreading skepticism and awareness towards superstition and bad ideas. Okay,
fair enough. I mean, nothing I don't disagree with there. It said on your bio as well that you're an ex-Christian, just for context.
That's right. Yeah, I was a Christian for 20 years. I was born into a Christian family, went to church pretty much every single Sunday and Wednesday throughout my entire life. When I went to college, I started questioning my beliefs, mainly because of pressure from other people. Not that they were pressuring me to be an atheist, but they, we have, as college students do, discussions about theology and religion. And I was asked if I believed in God, and to which I responded, yes. And then the follow-up question is, why do you believe in God? And I couldn't think of any good reason. So I started going out and searching for a good justification for my belief. And when I realized that there wasn't any out there, and from what I could find, no one had any good justification for their belief, I was forced to do what the only intellectually honest thing was to say, I no longer believe in these claims. I no longer can honestly say I believe in God.
Man, you know what? I do a lot of podcasts and interviews, and I'd love to, just on a side topic, because I want to keep it, obviously, what we agreed on today, which was a debate, and I'd love to do that with you. But I'm very much interested in your story, and subject to how you feel how the debate goes, and whether it's civil and kind and respectful to one another, or it just results in absolute debauchery. I would like to interview one day on your story about your deconversion. I've been wanting to do that for a while. It's been hard to get someone on. And I assume it was some type of evangelical Protestant tradition?
Yeah, primarily your standard non-denominational Christian, young earth
Yeah.
creationist, the whole 9 yards. Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, it seems to be the deconstructionist movement seems to be quite a growing movement online. Anyway, it was quite interesting. But we'll get back to the topic, which was the debate about morality. But yeah, I'd love to interview one other day too. That would be great. So,
Sure.
I think it would be nice to kick off. I mean, it's always helpful to give an understanding of. For me, it's very, very difficult to understand what atheistic morality is, and it seems to be, I guess, some type of moral subjectivism and moral relativism. Ultimately, that's the governing justification. Could you just tell me, like, what morality is within the atheistic, like, worldview?
Sure. Well, first of all, there is no atheistic morality and there is no atheist worldview. Every atheist is going to have a different understanding and a different idea of what morals are to them. There is as many different opinions out there as there are atheists. So the only thing that we all agree on is that we don't believe there's a God, and that's it. So when it comes to my own moral understanding, my basis for morality is well-being. So I define morality as the enhancement of well-being and immorality as a detraction of it. So actions are moral when they enhance well-being, health, and happiness, and they're immoral when they cause unnecessary suffering. And that's the long and short of it. And based on that subjective starting point, because you're right, it is subjective. There's nothing intrinsic in the universe that forces us to care about well-being, other than I find myself caring about well-being in my own life because evidently that's all I have. If I'm not alive, my conscious experience ends. So that's literally the only thing I truly have is my own well-being. So once we decide on that subjective starting point, then we can make objective assessments of actions based on the consequences towards well-being. So if you stab someone in the face with a knife, I can say, based on my definition of morality, your action is immoral if we define morality as, with regards to well-being.
Yeah, it results in some type of utilitarianism ultimately. And I understand that aspect of it. But ultimately, the issue that I have with atheistic morality is that there's no absolutes. There is no objective or absolute. So, like, if I were to ask you, is it objectively wrong to grape and unalive children? What would your answer be?
Well, I would say there is no objective morality. It's just subjective. So if we define, like I already said, if we define morality as the enhancement of well-being, then we can say that graping women and hurting children, those things are immoral based on that definition.
Yeah, but that's not objectively true, though, what you just said, because you're governed on a subjective stance. So ultimately, you don't think graping and unaliving children is absolutely wrong.
Well, I would say that it's absolutely true that graping and unaliving children they're not in the best interest of those people. So it's true that those actions cause unnecessary harm and suffering. And so if we just define morality as causing unnecessary harm and suffering, then we could say, sure, it's, if you want to use the word objective, it's true that those actions are immoral, but that's on the starting point of this is what we mean by immoral.
But I don't think objective, like truth by nature, according within the Christian worldview, is ultimately an objective, an absolute. It's not based on subjective. Whether you believe in the truth or not has no impact on the truth. Within an atheistic standpoint, you can't appeal to an objective truth because you're appealing to a stand outside of your own mind. So you just said it's objectively true that unaliving and graping children, but that's wrong within your subjective framework, but you can't appeal to an objective because you're admitting something existing outside of your mind. So what do you mean by objectively true? Does that even exist in an atheistic worldview?
Well, what I said was that objectively it causes suffering. So it's true that those actions cause suffering. Maybe this is just an issue of semantics. So if we say, is it objectively true that the wall behind me is blue? That's only true so far as we agree on what the word blue means. So if we agree on what morals are, if we agree on how we define morality, then we can say it's objectively true that these actions are moral or immoral, just like we can say that it's objectively true this wall is blue, but if we now define blue is red, now it's not objectively true that this wall is blue. So it just depends on our definition.
So are you saying that an objective standard actually exists when it comes to truth, or it's still a subjective reality?
Truth is what corresponds to reality. So there is one objective reality that we all share, and the truth is that which corresponds to it. So it's true that this wall is blue. It's true that unaliving children is immoral because it causes suffering.
Let me rephrase. Is truth limited to the human mind, though, that your mind, or is truth objective for my mind as well? Are you saying reality itself is objective?
There's an objective truth outside of everyone's mind. So objectivity means it exists absent of mind. So regardless of anyone's opinion, it's true that
like the mathematical laws of the universe. Yeah? Whether you believe in them or not, that's still true, right? It's objectively true. The cosmological constants.
Assuming that our understanding of those laws is accurate, yes.
But it's not limited to our understanding.
Again, maybe this might be a semantics issue. So, like, if we say the laws of the universe are true, that's only true so far as we accurately understand the universe. Maybe I'm not understanding your question.
So the reality is is that within an atheistic framework, we're speaking about morality, and I asked you a question without digressing too much. Is it objectively wrong to unalive and grape children? We're talking about, like, this is one of the issues I have with atheism, that there is no governing objective standard. It's only limited to my subjective experience. But yet there is an ability, or I think somewhat a contradictory statement that's made, to appeal to objective while simultaneously saying one doesn't exist. And I think you just did that with truth. When you said morality is limited to our subjective experience, I don't want to cause human suffering. That should be the standard according to me. And it's objectively true that unaliving and graping children is wrong within my subjective framework. I see that as a contradiction.
Well, I didn't say that it's objectively true that it's wrong. I said it's objectively true that it causes suffering. So if you stab someone in the face, that causes them suffering. We can all agree on that, and that's just a matter of reality.
It would infer that suffering is wrong within your framework. So yeah, I'm just inferring your ultimate conclusion, which is it's wrong. Suffering is wrong. We shouldn't cause human suffering.
Well, the leap from this causes suffering to this is wrong, that is my subjective opinion. So that's where subjectivity comes into it, and that's how we define morality.
Yeah, but I guess within the atheistic framework, it's not absolutely or objectively wrong to unalive and grape children. Is that true within your atheistic worldview?
I'll say yes, insofar that nothing is objectively right or wrong. Morality.
So there you go. See, this is the issue I've got. I feel like the debate's over. If you just admitted that it's not absolutely wrong to grape and unalive children, on what basis are you providing any justification that your worldview is the one we should follow?
Well, I don't think anyone can have objective moral standards. That's the thing.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Well,
so where's your justification for me to do what you want to say? Like you want me to live by your standard ultimately. So you just said there is no objective wrong. So there are circumstances where raping and unaliving children is okay according to your worldview. So on what basis should I follow what you say? That's madness, in my opinion.
Well, that's not what I said. Just because that there's no objective morality doesn't mean that there are circumstances where they are okay. So
are there any circumstances where it's okay?
I would say there are no circumstances where graping or unaliving children are okay.
So it's objectively
Would you agree with that?
wrong. Yeah, I believe it's objectively wrong. So you believe it's objectively wrong?
No. I think that morality
This is the issue I've got. I can never get past this point.
If there's no circumstances where unaliving children is okay, then you think that the God of the Bible is immoral because he commands the slaughtering of children multiple times.
We can get to the morality of the Bible by all means in the Christian worldview, but you just said and you just admitted to people here online that there is circumstances that it's okay, that it's not objectively wrong by which to unalive and grape children. I mean, that's crazy. I can't believe you even admitted that.
You're conflating two different things. I'm saying it's not objectively wrong. That doesn't mean that there's circumstances where it's acceptable.
That directly means that, because if it's not objectively and absolutely wrong, You are inferring there are circumstances where it is okay.
Right and wrong, by definition, are subjective. So there is no such thing as objective morality.
So you have nothing to offer to this debate on by what means should we follow what you say as an atheist that does not believe in objective morality or absolute right and wrongs. On what basis should I follow what you say? Tell me.
Well, do you care about well-being?
Yes.
Well, great. So do I. So if we agree on
But
our
it's not
goal,
objective.
we both have the same. We both have the same shared subjective goal of preserving well-being. So then we can discuss and figure out the best way to live in accordance with that goal. The goal of caring about well-being that we share is subjective. And that's why all of morality is ultimately subjective. But once we agree on our goal, then we can say, okay, these actions cause unnecessary harm or suffering, so we're going to say those actions are immoral. That's just how we define morality.
So what now? Morality is governed by consensus. You just said if we agree. So if we came to a consensus and agree that unaliving, raping children is okay, and that's a good well-being, there's societies where that they do that, child sacrifice, they rape kids, that it's okay within their culture. If they have a consensus on that, is that okay then?
I would say no, because those things are not in the best interest of those people's and those kids' well-being. So it would be like, is it ever true that this wall could be red? It just depends on how we define the words red and blue. If we change the definition of moral and immoral to something else, then we could say, sure, it's moral to kill children, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying under my definition of morality, which is preserving well-being, then killing children is immoral.
Yeah, but I guess that's not an objective truth ultimately, and that's not an objective moral standard.
It's
purely subjective. Truth. Yeah. So ultimately, do you believe that we should all do what you say, right? We should live by your moral standard?
Not necessarily what I say. I think that we should all strive to protect the well-being of people and thinking creatures.
But according to your subjective standard, right? Like you want me and everyone in the audience here to live by your subjective standard of well-being, right?
Well, you already agreed to it, so I don't need to convince you. And I bet everyone watching this also cares about well-being as well. So
but
I don't
according
need to do
to how you define it, that was the question.
How do I define what?
So you define your like well-being's within a subjective framework according to Jed's mind. So ultimately, that's what you believe, and you believe we should live by Jed's moral subjective framework. Everyone, right?
I'm not saying that you're proffering. My understanding of well-being may not be perfect, and I'm open to discussion and nuanced debate to change my mind on certain topics. And I think that within morality, there's lots of gray area and nuance, and there's a lot of case-by-case bases where we have to look at each situation and discuss what's the most moral action we can possibly take. And in a lot of situations, it's not black and white. So we might be in a situation where we have to pick the least worst of two evils. So we have to pick one action which amongst a bunch of horrible options, we have to pick the least horrible one, and that's where debate and discussion come in, where we have to decide amongst ourselves.
And you need to reach a consensus.
Yeah.
That's one of the dilemmas with the subjective framework within atheistic worldview, is that ultimately you need to reach a consensus in order to govern what is, I guess, a subjective moral framework that everyone should live by. It's self-defeating. It contradicts itself. It's like...
We already have a consensus that we all care about well-being. We already have that. You care about well-being.
No.
Well-being.
No. Hang a second. I believe in an objective moral standard. I believe that morality is absolute according to that objective standard, well-being in accordance with that. Your understanding of well-being is subjected to Jed's moral framework within your own mind. That's two different understandings of well-being. We have no consensus on that. You want me to live by your standard. And so the issue that I've got is you have no justification right here, right now, other than consensus and morality by consensus. Knowing what the Nazis did, knowing what Pol Pot did, is absolutely a horrible moral framework to follow by. History proves that, and that is very much in an empirical sense. Ultimately, you want a moral standard by your own mind, so there's no justification for me to follow what you say. Like, why should I follow what you say if morality is just limited to your mind? What's your justification?
Because it's in your best interest. You want to do what's in your best interest. I want to do what's in my best interest. And usually those two... Well,
what if my best interest is not to follow you?
if we're going to share space with each other, we need to figure out the best way where we can cooperate and live and function in a society that benefits everyone. And the objections, well, you care about well-being, right? You already said you do. Well,
Yeah,
and
but
here's the thing.
not to your standard, though. I don't have the same moral standard as you.
Sure, but the objections that you're raising towards my understanding are present in everyone's, including yours. So you say you have access to an objective moral standard. Let's talk about where that moral standard comes from. How do you know it's objective? Where are you getting this objective moral standard, and why should I care about it?
Because the justification and grounding of morality, truth, logic, and reason exists in an immaterial, immutable, transcendental mind. So ultimately, morality is ground within presupposing a divine, universal, immaterial, immutable mind. That's the only way you get that. The same with the laws of logic. So it's the impossibility of the contrary. There's no other grounding that you have for an objective truth, objective morality, logic and reason. The laws of logic can only be grounded in a divine, universal, immaterial mind. It's quite self-explanatory.
What does it mean to have logic grounded in an immaterial mind? To me, that sounds
So, for example, we're using the laws of logic right now, law of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, in order to make an argument back and forth.
Right.
Do you believe those laws are objective?
Sure. Yeah, those are axioms that we have to assume as a starting place.
But you believe they don't originate in your mind?
Right. I think they're facts of the universe.
Okay, so they're objective facts of the universe. Now, does it require a mind in order to conceptualize the laws of logic?
No. Well, yes, but they would exist. Logic would still exist if all minds were eradicated from the universe.
Beautiful, but it's still, okay, so the laws of logic are independent of our human mind. Yeah, careful, you might become a Christian now, okay? You might come back, okay? So if they're if they're grounded in a universal mind, if they're grounded outside of minds within the universe, that you just admitted then, you just conceded that they're objective, and they don't require our minds in order to conceptualize it, therefore a divine immaterial mind in order to make it accessible to us is required within the universe.
I'm not sure I understood that lead. You're saying because the laws of logic exist outside of human minds.
And it requires a mind in order to conceptualize the laws of logic. It's not dependent upon it, but requires a mind for abstract thought. We need a mind to conceptualize morality, logic, and reason and truth. If it's outside of our mind, therefore a divine immaterial mind is needed in order to ground that idea, if it is objective, which you just admitted. Does that make sense?
No. I think for the same reason that you also mentioned physics, and maybe if we switch to physics, this would be a little bit more, that might be a better analogy.
Do mathematics require a mind?
Well, physics also exists outside of our mind, right? So the laws of physics, assuming that our understanding of them is accurate, if humans were eradicated, if every mind from the universe was gone, physics would still exist, or I should say matter and space would still behave the same way, right? So I don't understand why that necessitates some mind action of the universe.
You're deviating from the atheistic worldview somewhat now, because in order to be consistent, those laws or cosmological constants of the universe, those mathematical laws of physics, regardless of laws of logic, they are, in order with an atheistic worldview, that actually is a human convention, a language that is descriptive of what they're seeing in the universe. So it's still limited. It's a human language that is not objective. It's not independent of the human mind. So the moment you admit that something is objective, independent of the human mind, you're actually admitting there is an objective standard, because laws require a lawgiver. Laws are conceptualized in a mind. A mind is needed to order and enact a law, and a divine mind is what grounds those universal cosmological laws. See, I have a justification for those laws to exist outside the mind. The moment you would go outside your mind, you're admitting to an objective standard that requires a divine mind to ground them.
So I think you might be conflating, and correct me if I'm wrong, descriptive with prescriptive laws. And I heard you make the distinction, but then it seemed like you conflated them right afterwards. So when I say that the laws of physics exist outside the human mind, you're right that the laws, as in the mathematical equations, are entirely human constructs. So those are ways that we describe the way that matter interacts with other matter in space.
So beautiful.
Like how the laws of logic are how we describe how how things interact and how matter exists and how non-contradiction and all that. So those laws are descriptive, but what they describe exists absent a mind. So the math equation itself would not exist if it weren't for humans, but if you have two rocks bumping into each other, that interaction would be exactly the same with or without any human minds.
Okay, so here's the thing. I think this is where I want to draw the link. Okay, are you familiar with the transcendental argument for God?
Rings a bell, but
that's right. This is what I'm grounding. This is what I'm grounding the argument in. Ultimately, and you're not allowed to use ChatGPT. Okay.
I'm just looking up the transcendental argument.
Hey, that's cheating, man. You can't use ChatGPT.
I'm not on ChatGPT. I'm just using Google.
So ultimately is the idea of being descriptive of what we've seen in the universe and not prescriptive is the idea that it requires a mind in order to conceptualize those laws of the universe, whether they be philosophical laws or laws of logic, which we're employing now, or the mathematical, cosmological constants of the universe, which ground our reality. They require a mind in order to ground them. If they're objective, even so we're describing what we're seeing in reality, if it is objective of the human mind, even from a descriptive perspective, it still requires a mind in order to conceptualize. Therefore, it requires a mind to ground them, and that it can only ground them in a universal immaterial mind that we call God.
You lost me when you said it requires a mind to conceptualize.
Yeah.
If there's no human minds, then they're not conceptualized.
But you just also admitted that the laws will still be there independent of human minds.
Well, the laws, as in, a math equation won't be there without a human mind. But the interaction, what we describe still happens without human minds. But the description itself wouldn't exist without human minds.
Do the cosmological constants exist if there was no humans?
Yes.
That's my point. My point is that they're there. Yeah. So it requires a mind in order to describe them. They exist outside the human mind. A divine mind is ordered in order to ground the idea that they actually exist universally.
I disagree. So if there weren't a human mind, if there weren't any minds, then they wouldn't be described.
But they would still exist.
Like a rock,
but they would still exist
without any minds in the universe, right? So it doesn't.
You're admitting now there's an objective standard that exists outside of your mind, a law, an objective law, regardless of how we define it, it still exists outside the human mind. You just admitted that.
Well, let me be clear. The laws of physics and logic are descriptive. And so what we describe exists without a human mind, but those descriptions wouldn't exist if it weren't for minds. So there would be no conceptualization if there weren't any minds in the universe.
Well, we just need to simplify it. They either exist independent of human minds, or the laws are dependent upon the human mind.
What do you mean by, when you say the laws, what exactly do you mean? You mean
the cosmological constants of the expansion rate of the universe, the force of gravity. These things are independent of human minds.
The concepts that those laws describe are independent of human minds.
Beautiful. And those are what we declare laws, and they're universal and objective and require a mind in order to ground the idea that they exist. The thing is that the crux of the conversation is supposed to be about morality. And just for the audience that's joining, the idea of the reason we're at this topic now is the idea that does anything objectively exist? And if anything objectively exists, then what standard is that? And it seems to me the atheistic worldview has no choice but to appeal to an objective while simultaneously saying one doesn't exist. I believe that you need to presuppose my God in order to make an argument. You need to presuppose my God in order to make an objective moral claim. But simultaneously, you don't want to admit one exists. So I just don't, for me, I feel like your worldview is in contradiction. You can't make an argument or a justification as to why I should live by your standard. Why I should not be governed by hedonism.
It seems like you're saying physics, morality, and logic can't exist without a God. Someone making them up.
No, it can't exist without grounding them in a universal immaterial mind. You can't justify them.
I don't understand what grounding them in a mind means. What does that mean? A mind makes them up. That's what you mean?
Yeah, a law requires a lawgiver. Yeah. And an immaterial universal law requires an immaterial universal mind.
a prescriptive law requires a lawgiver, but a descriptive law is describing a phenomenon in nature, and that phenomenon exists absent any minds.
It's still a law
So we don't
that
need a
requires a
mind.
lawgiver.
There doesn't need to be a mind to tell matter how to act, right? Matter just does what it does. There's no person that says, okay, these rocks are going to attract towards each other at this with this force across the entire universe. There was never a person that decided these rocks are going to attract with this force. Like, that's just a fact of the universe.
Yeah, but the thing is that your facts, you can't ground them in objective truths. Like, here's
I don't know
the
what
reality.
grounding facts the mind means.
So when I say grounding, I mean, I have to make a justification. So, for instance, in atheistic worldview, you have plenty of is's, but you have no oughts.
There's no atheistic worldview.
Pardon?
I just said there's no atheistic worldview, but sorry to interrupt.
All right. So I apologize. All right. Within your worldview, you have plenty of is's. So it is wrong to do this. It is the laws of figures, laws of reality state this. It is, especially when it comes to moral standards, you have plenty of is's that you can describe what's going on, but you have no justification or ought. Okay. You have no grounding in your ideas in order for me to behave a certain way. You've already admitted in the interview here that, or the debate here, that there's no objective wrong when it comes to raping and unaliving children, that it's purely a subjective standard that you live by. It's not absolutely not objectively wrong. You're saying that the laws of the universe are, I don't really understand if you mean they're objective or non-objective. It seems as though you're limiting them to the human mind, but like, do you see the contradiction? There's no standard outside of your mind and no justification why I should follow what you say. It kind of looks like you want to be the God of this world and that I should live by your standard. That's what it sounds like.
What it seems to me is that you can't fathom a universe that could exist without any minds. You think nothing can exist unless there's a guy making stuff up. Nature can't behave in a certain way unless there's some magical wizard in the sky who says, okay, this is how these things are going to behave. I'm going to decide rocks behave this way. Where I'm saying, if you just take a bunch of matter and energy and put it into a universe, it's going to behave in a certain way just because.
But you believe in a little bit of magic too, though, right? You believe in one little bit. You believe in one little bit of magic.
What's that? Not that I'm
aware of. You believe something came from nothing.
No, I don't believe that.
What do you believe?
Well, you're talking about the origin of the universe, I take it?
Yeah, origin of life.
Yeah. Well, those are two different things.
Origin of life. Tell me what you believe. How origin of life.
Well, I subscribe to abiogenesis, which doesn't mean something came from nothing. It just means that inorganic matter started to self-replicate through some process that's not fully yet understood.
But you believe that there was nothing before the universe? You believe in the Big Bang?
I don't necessarily believe there was ever a before the universe. I don't know. I have no idea how the universe
have a beginning?
If there was anything beforehand. I have no idea if there was something before the universe or if time began with the existence of a singularity already in existence, or if our universe is part of a big multiverse. I have no idea, and I don't claim to know any of these things with any degree of certainty whatsoever.
There's a scientific consensus that the Big Bang happened, that universe, time, matter, space had a beginning. Do you believe that or not?
Our local presentation of the universe had a beginning with the Big Bang, but that doesn't mean it's the beginning of all of reality. So there could be some kind of meta-reality that's outside of what we observe.
This sounds a bit magical, and this sounds a bit not based on empirical science. So I've seen numerous videos of yours, and you've made claims here as well that you govern yourself in evidence and not in magic and sure. Ridiculous notions of a wizard in the sky. So I don't think you should be appealing to that. So unless it's empirically based, you can't, I guess, presuppose an argument from silence, the idea that there could be a meta-reality. So you're going outside of your standard.
Just to be clear, I'm not saying I know that there is a meta-reality. I'm just saying that I'm open to the possibility. That's an option. Maybe there is no meta-reality. I have no idea, and I'm not claiming to know.
But yours is faith-based, though, just as much as mine.
Well, you're claiming to know that the universe was spoken into existence by a magical guy. That's your claim, right? That God spoke the universe into existence using a magical spell or an incantation.
I guess that would be somewhat of a facetious description. I would ultimately be governed by the idea that the faith and trust in Christ has revealed the truth through him. Then, yeah, I would In essence, that would be the root of the idea that God spoke reality into existence. But
Well,
I believe there's sufficient evidence for it. But ultimately, you do appeal to this idea that outside of empirical standard, that something came from nothing. I mean, the universe had a beginning. So how did the universe start? How did the universe start?
I have no idea. Maybe something always existed. Maybe matter and energy.
So if you have no idea, how do you know it wasn't a God?
I don't know it wasn't a God. But you're saying you do know that it was a God.
Wait a second. If you don't know it wasn't a God, then you can't be an atheist. You're agnostic. We're getting one step closer to Christianity and theism.
Can you give me what you think an atheist is? Can you define that word for me?
There's no God.
No,
atheist.
That's not what an atheist is.
That's exactly what an atheist is.
An atheist is someone who's not convinced that there's a God.
No, that's an agnostic atheist. Okay. So agnostic atheist is that there's not enough sufficient evidence for a God to exist. If you want to define yourself as an agnostic atheist, that's why you've got Dr. Bart Ehrman, Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic. The best arguments for the atheistic worldviews maintain an agnostic atheist position. You are an atheist position here represented in this debate. If you want to change your position right here and now, by all means you can, but atheism is no God. And you just said that you don't know that a God didn't create the universe. So
I'm not changing my position. You're just telling me what you think an atheist is, and you're wrong. So an atheist is someone who's not convinced that a God exists. I'm also an agnostic atheist, like Alex O'Connor and the rest of the people you mentioned, in that I'm not making the claim I know that there's no God, and that's not what an atheist is. Agnosticism is not some middle ground between theism and atheism. It's not like there's a theism and then in the middle there's agnosticism and atheism on the other side. Atheism and theism are a true dichotomy. You're either convinced there's a God or you're not convinced. Agnosticism and Gnosticism refer to knowledge. So do you claim to know this with any degree of certainty? I say I'm an agnostic atheist because I'm not convinced there's a God, but I don't claim to know that there's no God.
Yeah, so that's the reason why you need to define yourself as an agnostic atheist, that there's not enough evidence, or I don't know of any evidence that is sufficient to demonstrate there is no God, there is a God. That's agnostic atheism. It makes harmonious sense. That's why atheism is a self-defeating statement because you can't prove a negative. And now all the new atheists, or not new atheism per se, realize that fact, and the best philosophers realize that fact. But you said today that you're an atheist, and now you're changing it to agnostic atheist, which I'm fine.
Agnostic atheists are also atheists.
No, they're not. So, but we can we can agree to disagree.
You're speaking to one right now. Take it from me. You're speaking to one right now.
Well, I recommend you call yourself agnostic atheist. Yeah.
So an atheist is a broad generalization. It's anyone who is not convinced that any gods exist. You could be a Gnostic atheist, which means that you you claim to know that no gods exist. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not a Gnostic atheist. I am an agnostic atheist, and that I'm not making the claim to know that no gods exist. So I'm not changing anything about my position. That's always been my position.
Can I just say this? You know, because the problem with these type of debates when it comes to atheism or agnostic atheism, I mean, there is no objective truth ultimately. You want me to appeal, and everyone, this is how I define it. I'm not trying to misrepresent you and correct me, but ultimately I see this as you just want me to live by your standard without giving me a justification for explaining why. And the thing is that you're not certain that there is no God. You're not certain that there is a God that a God didn't create the universe. But you are certain the idea that when you said before at the start of the video that you can't justify a God or the why you believe in a God. And you said you're a Christian for 20 years and you grew up. Do you mind? I don't think there's going to be a lot of fruitful discussion ultimately in this because we're not arguing. There's nothing. I don't believe you're offering something that is ultimately going to benefit human flourishing. Because from a scientific empirical standpoint, the case studies demonstrate that a theistic worldview propagates a higher birth rate than secular societies. Just that alone should demonstrate the falsity or the fallacy of an agnostic atheist secular worldview, because those societies don't promote human flourishing because you're not having enough babies. So one thing I'd love to ask you, if you allow me to digress.
Hang on, can I address what you just said really quick?
Sure.
So the way that we measure the flourishing of society, I would not qualify strictly based on birth rate. In fact, if we look at the, generally speaking, bad
just real
places
quick,
to
I didn't
live,
say solely.
Yeah.
I'll let you respond, but
Okay.
I said that just
put a
birth
caveat.
rate alone is a factor for it, but there's also lower depression, higher life expectancy, all within theistic and religious worldviews.
Areas that have higher life expectancy tend to have the lowest birth rates. So those two are in opposition to each other. So any area that has a really high life expectancy has a really low birth rate. And that's like a complete inverse relationship.
The case studies and the empirical evidence is self-evident. Whatever category you want to define human flourishing, where it's greater happiness, greater health, greater birth rates, a longer life expectancy, they're all far lower within a secular society compared with a theistic one. So just that alone, there's no way to even justify within a secular society for human flourishing. You can't even argue for it from a scientifically empirical standpoint. It doesn't even work.
Well, I'd be curious where you're getting that information, because what I've seen is that
I'd be happy for you to use ChatGPT on that. Actually, I did bring up a study before because I thought this would come up. But there's a Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health in 2018, which is greater happiness, lower depression, less substance abuse. There is another case study, the Pew Research Center 2015, The Future of World Religions, report that religious people, especially Christians and Muslims, has significant higher fertility rates, with only being one of the categories by which we would measure human flourishing. I'm sure we need more humans in order for humans to flourish. Just like you would agree with that, right?
We at least need to maybe not. I don't know. We can't run out of humans, but we're certainly in no issue of running out of humans.
Jed, with respect, I don't think there's any fruit in this debate. There's nothing you're offering to the table to convince me or anyone else. There's 8 billion people in the world. If we had 7 billion people in the world, would the world be worse? I'm not convinced it would be. Dude, you just admitted that we don't need more humans in order to flourish. So, I think the debate is over.
Certainly we need to continue having at least some birth rate. So I'm not saying we should have 0 humans. I'm saying if the birth rate was, say, like 0.7 or something like that, and our society was on a slow and steady decline, maybe that would actually be better for society, because that means every human gets a bigger distribution of resources. If we have an exponentially growing population, then the resources are going to be stretched more thin amongst all these people. If we have fewer people, then there might be more resources to go around for everyone. So I'm not necessarily going to make the claim that, I should say, I'm not agreeing with the claim that the more babies we have, the higher the birth rate necessary, the more flourishing there is. I don't think that's true at all. I've also seen some studies.
That's not what. Just real quick. That's not what I said. I said you would agree that we need more humans in order to flourish. For human flourishing requires more human beings, and you said not so sure. Yeah, well, you disagree.
Right.
So yeah, I think the debate's pretty. Look, can I just ask you something? Because to me, again, I don't think the atheistic morality. There is no atheistic moral standard. I think you admitted that. There's only Jed's standard. True. And I don't think that Jed's standard is enough to convince me to go to your side ultimately. But can I just say this? You were Christian for 20 years. Do you think you may have got it wrong? Do you think you may have got it wrong, your understanding of Christianity? Is it possible? How did you believe that the Bible at one point in time was inspired, right? By God? You believe? How did you know that?
Well, at the time, I only thought I knew it because that's what I was told by everyone around me. I lived in a bubble.
No, but did you actually analyze what that meant?
I just accepted what everyone else told me. And then when I went and started actually doing research for myself and reading what the Bible actually said, which I really did seriously as a Christian, once I started reading it, I thought, wow, this stuff is abhorrent. It's incredibly immoral. The God of the Bible advocates for the slaughter of children, which you yourself said you have object to. And we have no idea of knowing whether what's written in the Bible is actually the Word of God. And that's where your moral system falls apart. Because you say mine is entirely subjective, but every complaint, every opposition you have towards my morality is also the case with yours. Where we have no access to the mind of God. Even if there is a God out there, We have no idea what he thinks. We have no idea what he wants. We have no idea if what he thinks and wants is even in our best interest. And certainly the God character in the Bible doesn't have our best interest in mind. That much is very clear because he so often advocates for the slaughter of children. Deuteronomy 20:16-17, I'm sure you're familiar with, where God says to commit complete genocide on 6 different tribes, including the children. So every single action that I could possibly call immoral has an asterisk next to it in Christianity, because things are only immoral so far as God says they're wrong. As soon as God changes his mind, or as soon as God says, okay, in this situation, it's okay to kill children, it's okay to, I don't know, do any of these other horrible things that God advocates for, own slaves and whatnot. So,
but but none of that, I mean, ultimately, none of what you just said is objectively wrong according to your standard. So, like, that's the problem I've got. You're not making any objective truth claims. You're not making any objective moral claims. All you just said there is ultimately just, it's like saying the color blue. You know, I like the color blue, or I don't like the color blue. There's no reason for me to agree with you. But I wanted to ask you just before, you said you're a Christian for 20 years. How did you know it was inspired? You just said because of what people told you?
At the time, I thought I knew it was inspiring, or I believed it was inspiring.
Yeah, back to Jed then. Christian Jed?
Yeah.
How did Christian Jed know it was inspired?
I just assumed that it was because that's what I was told. I believed for bad reasons. And once I realized that, then I stopped believing.
So you never knew actually why the Christians consider it inspired?
Well, I knew why I considered it inspiring. But that was a bad reason.
You just said that before only because of what people told you. You never actually investigated why it was inspired.
Why do you think it's inspired?
Well, I'm happy to tell you, and I'm not really trying to do any gotcha moments, but for me to see here that you put away the faith without actually properly investigating it, and you should have done it with a critical lens. Like the fact that you grew up in a young earth or young, what do you call it?
Creationist.
Pardon?
A young earth creationist.
Young earth creationist, which means you grew up like you would have grown up kind of cultish, you know, like this, you know, the whole water boy, you know, type, you know, the devil, all that stuff, everything, right? That to me, that understanding of Christianity is not the historical understanding of Christianity. I mean, there's a reason why they considered it inspired, because it was a church decision, because of some miraculous event that happened 2,000 years ago. You know, there's certain things that need to be answered from a critical historical lens, which you're a friend of the critical method because you employ it all the time. And I encourage it. What you said at the start of this debate, I really agree with, which is no claim, no religious claim, no religious dogma should be excluded from criticism or ridicule. 100%. I'm right there with you. And I think that's objectively true. We should critically analyze things. And the fact is that there's certain historical events that you need to have an explanation for. For example, James, the brother of Jesus, who thought Jesus was a lunatic, okay, was a critic of his. He was critical and skeptical of Jesus. And then 40 days after the crucifixion, he's in the upper room as a believer. And he becomes the head of the church in Jerusalem, preaching the death, deity, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And he dies for that and stoned to death by the Sanhedrin. So the question is, why did he change from being a critic to a believer? You got to answer that question. But you got to answer that question. Be critical about that. Be critical about that point. You have to be. You're so critical of the Old Testament morality. And I really encourage you to read a book, Is God a Moral Monster? There's a beautiful book on these topics, because most of your videos that I've seen smash the Old Testament, but I don't hear you smash Jesus.
I made some videos about Jesus, yeah.
Can you tell me one critical thing about Jesus?
Sure. I think everything about the gospel message is entirely toxic and disgusting. Everything. So the whole idea that we're made sick sinners that are worthy of being tortured forever just by the nature of our own existence, that we're so depraved that God had to come down and torture himself, have himself sacrificed to himself to serve as a loophole for rules that he made up so that we could avoid the punishment that he has in store for us. The whole crucifixion is just gaslighting. The whole thing is just God sacrificed himself so that we would feel sorry for him. Oh, thank you, Jesus, for suffering.
Just can you be specific? Can you just be specific about Jesus? What was it that Jesus said or did that you're critical of?
So, do you think Jesus is God?
I know he's the triune God, and you're going to go back to the Old Testament, okay?
No, not necessarily. No. I'm just wondering, is Jesus God?
Yes.
Okay, so then that means Jesus thinks that I deserve to be tortured unless I love him enough.
Just be specific. Just be specific about the historic. Just take a historical critical lens, okay? You just look at the things that are described in the Bible about Jesus. Like, what is it that you feel that it's wrong with? Like, is there anything before you chat GPT it now? Is there anything that you can bring up? Like,
I'm just getting the reference for you. Calm down. It's not ChatGPT. This is just Google. So in Matthew 10, Jesus says, anyone who loves their family more than me he says they're not worthy, which means they're going to hell. So you need to love Jesus more than anyone else in your life. You need to love him more than your kids. You need to love him more than your parents. And if you don't,
know why?
Then Jesus is going to torture you for all of eternity because he's a narcissist.
Okay,
he doesn't care about our well-being. He only cares about himself and being worshipped.
Sure, okay. But do you know why he said that?
Because he's a narcissist.
Dude, the guy went to the cross willingly. How can you call anyone a narcissist that dies for other people willingly? Like, you don't like the hero story?
If Jesus is God, then he knew he wasn't going to stay dead. He knew he was going to suffer for a few hours.
I don't think you're being charitable with Jesus, man. I don't think you're being charitable with him. Like,
I think you've fallen victim to Jesus' gaslighting, assuming the story is true.
Let me explain to you that scripture then. Let me explain to you that scripture about not being worthy of me. Just real quick, let me explain that scripture to you, because you just made a claim from it and you don't understand it. If you don't worship God, if you don't hold him, like if you don't love God as the highest standard of love, you'll do anything in the name of love. You understand that, right? You'll justify anything. You'd kill for your kids. You would kill for your wife. You would do anything. You could justify, especially within your worldview, where everything's subjected to Jed, and Jed's the moral standard, and Jed's the God of the universe. If you wanted to protect your family, you would kill, murder, cheat, and steal for your family, and you can justify it. You can, because it's protected in the name of your family. God is actually, what he's saying, the whole premise of love God with all your heart and your soul, because if you don't become a slave to God, you'll become a slave to your own mind, or a slave to the vices. That's the point. And I think even from a psychological standpoint, appealing to a God, and that's what Jordan Peterson says a lot too, even if you don't believe God exists, pretend there's one that you don't, you'll still benefit, because you don't want to be governed by what Jed thinks, because ultimately Jed's going to lead you to pain, suffering, and death. That's where all it leads to. And I've been there. So like the idea that you think that's critical, you're taking this whole point about hell, that, you know, this Calvinistic idea that God knew everything that was going to happen. Why did he create all the universe and all those things? You know, I'm asking you to be critical of the things that Jesus did. Like, is there anything that you like about what Jesus did? Like washing the feet of the disciples? Do you think there was anything good that he did?
Actually, I'm working on a video right now about how washing the feet of the disciples could actually be a euphemism for having gay sex. So that was how Jesus got his rocks off. But let's not go into that right now.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So look, here's the thing, Jed, come on, man. You're trying to hold a civil debate here, and you're saying it's a euphemism for gay sex. Dude, sure. Here's the thing. Hey. Unfortunately, the moment you say something like that, I'm not going to be charitable with you. You just admitted here in the debate that it's not absolutely objectively wrong to rape and unalive children. That is your moral standard. It is sickening, it is disgusting, and it's not worthy of me subscribing to your standard. Okay. You just said that before, and I didn't hammer you on the point on the basis that I was trying to be charitable. For you to say washing the feet is a euphemism for gay sex, that you're doing a video on that, we don't have to discuss that now. You're disingenuous. You're insincere. You're insincere, and someone that protects pedophiles. You're the pedophile lawyer. So on that basis, everyone, it's been very enjoyable. There's nothing for you to offer. There is nothing for you to offer. You are subscribed to this idea that it's okay to rape and unalive children, that it's not absolutely wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, the debate's over. Thank you, Jed. Really appreciate it, buddy. Really appreciate it, buddy.
Horrible debate. You're not even letting me defend my own position.
No, you got nothing to defend. You got nothing to defend.
You're criticizing me.
You got nothing to defend.
because you're criticizing me, even though the God that you worship commands people to
you just
slaughter
admitted
babies.
that it's not absolutely wrong to grape and unalive children. You've got nothing to offer in this debate at
Because
all.
I'm saying nothing is
You've got nothing to
objectively
offer.
right or wrong, because right or wrong is not in the realm of
Jed, you're
objectivity.
disingenuous. You didn't know why the Bible was inspired, yet you claim to be a Christian. You
You're not
don't
letting me
know
defend my
that God
position.
didn't create the
You're talking over
universe.
me.
You changed your position from agnostic atheist,
You're saddling me with
atheist
issues
to
that are
agnostic
in your own
atheist.
worldview.
Mate, you're
saddling me with all these
disingenuous.
issues that are in your own worldview.
You're just here for
God
clout. You're
said
not
it's
here for a
okay
discussion.
to slaughter children, and now you're trying to saddle me with that. In your perspective,
You're not here
slaughtering
for a
children
genuine
is okay when
discussion.
God
You're here
tells
for
you to.
clout. You just said that washing the feet of disciples is a euphemism for gay sex. Bro,
It
listen,
could be.
you're not here.
I said that it could be.
There is no historian and there's no serious philosopher or historian or theologian that would agree with you. You're using ChatGPT in this argument. I haven't used it once.
I've got Google open. It's not
You are
ChatGPT.
disingenuous. You have no idea what the atheistic worldview offers.
Hang on.
So I think everyone in this audience sees you for what you are. You're disingenuous, and I hope that you can actually use that critical mind of yours. You can use that critical mind of yours to actually analyze your own statements.
You're talking over me. There's many other instances in the Bible where
me talking over you is not wrong according to your worldview. I mean, I can do that. It's not objectively wrong. I hope that you find God, man. I hope that you find God, because this worldview you're on,
triggered by Jesus being gay and washing feet. But here's the thing,
dude. It's disingenuous. It's disingenuous.
Right?
Anyway, it's been fun, man. It's been fun.
So King David, you know the story.
I was interested in the discussion. But you're just here for clout.
Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, to go home and wash his feet.
We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of fun making clips of you saying that it's okay to unalive and grape children. Dude, that guy is. I thought the conversation was going good, but when the moment he says something like that, washing the feet of the disciples is a euphemism for gay sex. You're not here. You're not here to have a civil discussion. You just, and I let you go. In order, when you said that it's not absolutely and objectively wrong to grape and unalive children, when you said that, I let you off the hook, and I didn't press you on it, and I let you go into philosophy and the laws of physics and the divine mind. You haven't even understand the idea of grounding and justifying the idea of an objective standard, and you're appealing to one. Dude, it is disgusting that you would actually even suggest the idea of that it's not absolutely wrong of that when it comes to kids. And yet you want to appeal to this idea. You misrepresent the scriptures. You don't even know why Jesus says, "You're not worthy of me," challenging the Jewish people of putting their own ambitions and pride and money and power above God. That is the point. And they become enslaved by their own desires, just as you have. The fact that you're even here, I mean, I thought we were having a civil discussion. You come up with something disrespectful and disgusting like that. You're not serious. Critical method. You don't even know why the Bible was inspired. You can't even tell me why James became a believer. It's ridiculous, dude. I'm just disappointed because I wasted my time having a discussion with you, because you have no idea how to debate, and you have no idea the basic fundamentals of grounding an idea and justifying an objective standard. You have no idea about that. But good luck to you, man. Good luck to you. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, guys, I'm sorry that I had to bring someone on that was. I thought that there was going to be a genuine discussion. Yeah, no, he's not. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I wasted my time. I thought he was actually half smart. He doesn't even understand why the Bible was inspired, yet he's not a Christian. He doesn't even understand why. He doesn't even understand why. He actually said, "I'm not sure if God didn't create the universe. I only have a subjective standard, and nothing's absolutely wrong." What are you offering? There is no atheistic worldview. There's only Jed's worldview. Here's the idea. Jed, if you're watching, okay? And you might be watching now. I don't know. Maybe not. Here's the idea. Satan said, right, to Adam and Eve, "Eat of the fruit and you'll become like God." You're doing that. You're repeating Genesis, the fall of man. Anyway, God bless, guys. I'll have fun thinking about this in my own mind. Just crazy, huh? All right.
Did you notice how he began by agreeing, and then later on again towards the middle, that no idea should be exempt from ridicule?
What you said at the start of this debate, I really agree with, which is no claim, no religious claim, no religious dogma should be excluded from criticism or ridicule. 100%. I'm right there with you.
But then at the end, he got super triggered when I suggested that Jesus washing feet might be a euphemism for sex. He got so butthurt like a snowflake that he rage quit and kicked me off the live stream.
And you're saying it's a euphemism for gay sex. Dude,
Sure.
Here's the thing.
Hey,
Unfortunately, the moment you say something like that, I'm not going to be charitable with you.
He agreed that no ideas are so sacred they're exempt from ridicule, but evidently that doesn't apply to Jesus' sexuality, because when I brought that into question, he got super butthurt as if I was attacking him personally. That's the thing about Christians, is they have a really hard time differentiating personal attacks with critiques on theology, because to them, he is God, he is Jesus. If I attack Jesus, then I'm attacking him. He can't tell the difference between those two. And also, questioning Jesus' sexuality is certainly not an attack on Jesus. By suggesting that Jesus had gay sex, that's not in any way meant to be offensive. I have no issues with gay sex. It's only offensive if you start from the position that gay sex is immoral, and thus any suggestion that Jesus engaged in such an activity would cause you to be super butthurt if you're a homophobic bigot, which I think it seems from what we saw here that Matt may be a homophobic bigot.
For you to say washing the feet is a euphemism for gay sex, that you're doing a video on that, we don't have to discuss that now, you're disingenuous, you're insincere. You're insincere,
No,
and someone that protects pedophiles. You're the pedophile lawyer.
Admittedly, calling into question Jesus' sexuality, it's an outlandish claim, and I was happy to defend it with multiple Bible passages, but he wouldn't have it. He wouldn't even let me defend the claim that I made. Now, that's the definition of arguing in bad faith.
so King David, you know the
I'm
story
not
of King
interested.
David
I was
and
interested in
Bathsheba,
the
right?
discussion. I was interested in the discussion,
King
but you're just here
David
for
told
clout.
Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, to go
That's
home
right.
and wash
We're
his
going
feet.
to
That's what
we're
King
going to
David
have a lot
said.
of fun. We're going to have a lot of fun making clips of you saying that it's okay to unalive and great children.
In case you're curious, what I was attempting to reference was how King David told Bathsheba's husband Uriah to go home and wash his feet after David had sex with Bathsheba and made her pregnant. Because if Uriah went home and had sex with his wife Bathsheba, then he would think her baby is actually his. So then he wouldn't be suspicious of her cheating on him when he comes home from war and she's pregnant with someone else's kid. The story only makes sense when you interpret washing feet as having sex. So all I'm doing is taking that same euphemism that the Bible already clearly uses and applying it to another instance of washing feet. To me, that doesn't even seem that outlandish, but evidently that topic is off limits, because if you bring it up, Matt is going to get super butthurt because he's a snowflake and a coward. Matt has absolutely no idea what atheism is.
Agnostic atheists are also atheists.
No, they're not.
He's trying to tell me that I'm not a real atheist because I don't assert that there are no gods. I don't know any atheists who define atheism as the assertion that there are no gods.
An atheist is someone who's not convinced that there's a God.
No, that's an agnostic atheist.
He's trying to straddle me with the burden of proof by making me assert that there are no gods. It would be like if I tried telling him, you're not a real Christian because you're not a young earth creationist. True Christians believe Genesis is a completely literal and factual account of history. And because he doesn't believe that, he's not a true Christian. You see how disingenuous it would be of me to say that to him? He referenced Satan in the Garden of Eden as if it's a real story that actually happened.
Satan said, right, to Adam and Eve, eat of the fruit and you'll become like God. You're doing that. You're repeating Genesis. The fall of man.
Earlier, he was making fun of people who believe in this story, and now he's referencing it as if it's real.
Young Earth creationist, which means you
Someone
grew
who
up like
believes
kind
in
of,
Genesis.
you would have grown up kind of cultish, you know, like this, you know, the whole water boy, you know, type, you know, the devil, all that stuff, everything, right?
And by the way, Genesis doesn't say that Satan was in the Garden of Eden. It was a serpent who may or may not be Satan. The Bible makes no indication that the serpent is Satan. That's just an assumption that he's making. He didn't even know what a young earth creationist was.
Like the fact that you grew up in a young earth or young, like a young, what do you call it?
Creation.
Pardon?
A young earth creationist.
Young Earth creationist.
His big gotcha moment was just a misrepresentation of my position. I don't think objective morality exists. All of morality is subjective. And he takes that to mean, oh, so you're saying sometimes it's okay to kill babies. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I think it's always wrong to kill babies, but morality itself is subjective. There's no such thing as objective morality. And his moral system falls victim to the exact thing that he's trying to straddle me with. His moral system, which he claims is objective, is just an appeal to the subjective opinions of a God. And I asked how we know what God's opinions even are, and he never gave a satisfactory answer. He could appeal to the Bible, which says that God commands people to kill babies. So the very foundation for his moral system says killing babies is okay if God commands it. I brought this up multiple times, and he never even attempted to address it. He said, oh, we'll get to that later. But we never came back to it. I brought it up again, and he just brushed it off. He's trying to say, oh my God, your moral system says it's okay to kill babies. Mine doesn't, but his literally does. Deuteronomy 20, 16, and 17 says, God says, completely destroy these 6 tribes, leave alive nothing that breathes. A direct order from God to kill babies.
There are no circumstances where raping or unaliving children are okay.
So it's
Would you agree
objectively
with that?
wrong. Yeah, I believe it's objectively wrong.
He says killing children is always wrong, but then God commands people to kill children. So by his own definition, his God is immoral. I also brought this up again in a DM after our debate, and he just left me on red. He knows he can't defend his own moral system, so he spent the entire debate attacking mine, even though his suffers from all the same issues that he alleges that mine has. His moral system says sometimes it's okay to kill babies as long as God says so, which he does all the time throughout the Bible. His moral system, it's not a system at all. It's just adherence to the subjective opinions of men who claim to speak on God's behalf. We have no reason to think anything in the Bible is actually from God or representative of a God. He's just assuming that based on nothing, based on some guy, Jesus' brother died for his beliefs. So that means everything in the entire Bible is true. We don't even know what this person died for or if they actually died at all. What do you think? Did Matt represent Christianity well? Was he a good faith interlocutor? Did I do a good job defending my positions? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, take it easy.